How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we have been getting some requests to discuss the interrogation process, especially in regards to the Delphi murders involving Richard Allen. So recently, I think on day 10, they actually went over two interrogations that Richard Allen went through, both at the hands of the Indiana State Police. These happened 5 years after the murders took place. One was on October 13th, and the other one was on October 26th of 2022. So the murders happened in 2017. So this is 5 years later. I thought what me and Russ could do is we could break down how the Reid Technique works. Me and Russ do have some training in the Reid Technique. We could break down the interview process, the 9 steps, and then we could also tell you certain moments where you could see that in play. Now, mind you guys, we have not seen the video. The only people that have seen the video are the people that are at the courts, or people watching the trial. But I did watch a breakdown that came from Hidden True Crime. She is amazing. It was a great video she put together. I want to say almost 2 hours or 3 hours maybe. And then I'm going to show you 2 videos here. So what we'll do is the backdrop will, of course, be the Delphi murders, the interrogation of Richard Allen, R.A. But I think this will be a good video. It'll give you an understanding how the interrogations work. And then maybe when the videos come out, you could see these tactics in play. But again, we have not seen the video because the video has not been released to the public. But we thought me and Russ could go ahead and give you guys a good interpretation. Now, I am going to show you 2 videos just to give a backdrop on what we're going to discuss, and it's going to focus on that area of the trial where they were discussing the interrogations that took place on the 13th and the 26th. But I do want to say one thing. He never confessed on these days. He wound up confessing later when he was in prison, and then obviously complaining of the harsh prison conditions, or at least that's what the lawyer is saying. But what we're going to do now is let me first get Russ on. What's up, Russ?
Hey there, Anthony. How's it going, sir?
Good, Russ. You mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. My name's Russ Hamilton. I'm a former and now retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I'm also a former senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a private company that does reentry and rehabilitation work at a local county jail and a local probation department here. I am also the founder of Keepers of Chaos, where we do everything with regards to training, insight, history, fellowship, within the realm of everything that's correctional. I'm also often here on Tier Talk, and I don't know how many videos I've been in now for Tier Talk, but it's a gang of them.
Now, guys, this will be a good video. Now, mind you, we're going to go over the 9 steps, but this wasn't a successful attempt because they did not get Richard Allen's admission. But Jerry Holman, the one that did the second set of interviews on October 26th, or the interrogation, he did admit to knowing or being trained in the Reid Technique. And then all of a sudden, I started getting messages from people asking me if we're familiar with what that is, and maybe we could discuss. And then I thought me and Russ could talk about how it applies. But let me show the 2 videos real quick. They're both about 4 minutes each, so we can get that backdrop in play. And I do need these videos because they highlight a little bit more detailed of what was discussed during the interrogation. So I'm going to show you 2 videos. So let me get the first one in play. Let's start with this one.
To the latest now on the Delphi murders case, where we learned more today about the police interrogation of Richard Allen.
Yes, it was all caught on video. And for the first time, jurors were able to watch that video as Allen was questioned by the investigators. Now, Allen is the man who's charged in the deaths of the 2 teens, Abby Williams and Libby German. The bodies of both girls found in February of 2017 near the Monon High Bridge in Delphi.
Our Bob Siegel was in the courtroom and breaks down today's testimony.
Day 10 of testimony is focusing on the statements given by Richard Allen to state investigators before he was arrested. October 2022, That is when investigators first sat down for a formal interrogation of Richard Allen, and jurors today got to see actual video of that interview between Allen and state investigators. It started off with everyone being relaxed, with Richard Allen offering up information very freely, cooperating with investigators. But then when the investigators told him they wanted to search his phone and they wanted to conduct a search warrant at his home, the tone of the interview changed. At that point, Allen said, "Your attitude toward me has definitely changed. This feels like you're interrogating me. You've known from the beginning I was out there. I told you that." Steve Mullen, an investigator for the state, said, "We're not mad at you. We're not upset with you. We're just trying to get to the truth." Richard Allen said, "I think we're done." He said, "It's not me. You're not going to convince me it's me. I had nothing to do with those murders." At that point, they allowed Richard Allen to go, but they did serve a search warrant on his home. And 2 weeks later, they sat down with him again, this time with much tougher questions. State Police Lieutenant Jerry Holman is the one who conducted this interview, and he presented evidence that came from the state crime lab indicating that a cartridge found at the crime scene had cycled through one of Richard Allen's guns. Richard Allen, over and over throughout the interview, said, "I had nothing to do with this. I am not going to admit to something I didn't do. I can't explain something I don't know about." At one point, Richard Allen's wife, Kathy, was allowed to come in the interview room. She was crying. They hugged. He vehemently explained to her that he had nothing to do with the murders. And when Kathy Allen then went to leave the room and Jerry Holman came back in, that's when things got incredibly heated. He said, "Now you're going to drag your wife and daughter through this because you're too blank bullheaded to get out ahead of this." Richard Allen responded, "You're going to pay for what you've done to my wife. You want to blank with me, but you leave my wife out of this. Leave me out of this." At that point, Jerry Holman started screaming at Richard Allen, saying, "I know that you are the killer." At one point then, Richard Allen said, "If you're going to arrest me, arrest me." And Jerry Holman said, "Happy to." Very important testimony today. Actually, the words of Richard Allen that the jury got to hear for themselves coming up this afternoon. More words we expect from Richard Allen, this time in the form of alleged confessions that he made behind bars. The jury will be very interested in hearing that. We'll have that testimony coming up for you at 5. In Delphi, Bob Siegel, 13 News.
All right. So that's the first one. I want to show one more. So let me just show you one more. Just two different angles from two different news outlets. So I got one more left.
For the first time ever, jurors heard the chilling voice of accused killer Richard Allen and watched for the first time as he was questioned by investigators in the 2022 about the killings of two young girls in a small Indiana town of Delphi. Allen faces several counts of murder in the deaths of the two best friends, 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German. The two disappeared while hiking in 2017 in a park. They were found the next day. Both their throats had been slit, their bodies left in the woods. Today, in day 10 of Allen's trial today, riveting footage of two interrogation videos were played for jurors. The first was from October 13th of 2022. Allen was cooperating at first in the video, but then he turns combative when asked about what he was wearing the day of the murders. Police said his description of blue jeans and a dark jacket sounded exactly like the clothes worn by the so-called bridge guy, the alleged killer captured by Libby on her cell phone just moments before she was murdered. Allen then turned even more defensive, saying, quote, "I'm starting to feel like the main lead here," adding, "Arrest me or take me home. You're not going to find anything that connects me to the murders." And with that, Allen got up and left. Then, nearly 2 weeks later, Allen was on the defensive again during a second interrogation. An officer said Allen's gun matched cartridges that were found at the crime scene. But Allen again denied it, saying, "No way a bullet from my gun was found at a murder scene," adding, "I didn't shoot anyone. I've never even pointed a gun at someone. I wasn't there." Now, despite that denial and many others, 5 days later, Allen was officially arrested for the murders of the two young girls. But there are questions tonight about the prosecution's case, one day after a forensic scientist testified that no DNA from Allen had ever been found at the murder scene. All right, to break this all down, we're joined by Jesse Weber, News Nation's legal contributor and law and crime host. First of all, these two interrogations 2 weeks apart of Richard Allen that were played for the jury, how powerful do you think they were? Number one. And number two, it's important to note that both these interrogations happened 5 years after the murder.
You know, defense counsel in every kind of case says, oh, sloppy police interrogation, sloppy police work. You got to say, they didn't look at this tip from 5 years earlier.
Explain the tip.
So they knew that Richard Allen was at that scene. They had interviewed him back in 2017, and the sheriff had said it just kind of went under the radar. And when they revisited the files, they realized, oh, wait, we had somebody who said he was there when the girls were there. Maybe we should look at this a little further. And that's when they looked into him. That's when they got the gun. That's when they say the unspent cartridge found at the crime scene was cycled through his gun. So the jury's already hearing that there might not be the best police work. Now, when you look at these interrogations, there's a lot of it that hurts Richard Allen, right? His description, without even knowing that they have Libby's tape, his clothing description matches the bridge guy. The fact that he's getting defensive, you could say two ways. Well, he's defensive because he knows they're onto him, or he's defensive, I'm an innocent guy and they're coming after me. I think he really didn't have an explanation for the unspent bullet. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think when you look at when he's trying to explain himself to these officers, one of the things that the officers did, and this is totally legal, they weren't entirely truthful with him about certain evidence that they had.
Police are allowed to lie.
They're allowed to do that. But if you go into this and saying he's innocent until proven guilty and he's adamantly dying, that's not true. That's not true. It makes me wonder if the jury has pause, because with no DNA and really the unspent bullet cartridge is the best evidence they have. Is that enough to convict him?
There's also the significant factor that he was there. Let's set the scene here.
Right.
This is a remote park, a bridge in a park. That's why the two girls were last. One of the girls got out her cell phone as a man approached them, and you can hear her talking to them. They've played this snippet of video for the jurors. It appears that they recorded the man who was about to kill them moments before he actually did so, and he matches that description. When asked,
right,
what were you wearing when you were in the park that day, he says jeans and a dark jacket. That's exactly what the alleged killer was wearing. Thanks so much for watching. Go to.
All right, Russ, let me just shut this down. All right, so here's the thing. So what we could do today, Russ, is discuss a bit of the Reid technique. We'll start with the interview process, go into how it transitions into an interrogation, and then also show how it could apply here to the Richard Allen interrogation. Now, mind you, we don't have video, but we have been watching some videos, and we do have kind of a transcript or a breakdown. So I've been able to actually try to borrow some scenarios or some examples. When I go over the 9 steps later on, we'll be able to break some examples down and how that could have applied to the Richard Allen interrogation. But guys, if you're not familiar with the Reid technique is a structured method for interrogating suspects, beginning with the non-accusatory interview that transitions into an interrogation. It uses psychological pressure and persuasive tactics to elicit confessions. Now, granted, guys, before we get into this, I want to mention something. Sometimes people like Richard Allen who commit crimes, they do get themselves involved in the investigative process, one, because they can control the narrative, or just to see what information they have. So it's not unique for someone to volunteer their services knowing that they've committed the crime. And then also, I want to mention something else before we go in, is that the interview process is going to be, again, non-accusatory. It's an effort to build rapport. So it's going to be like, I'm going to find out what this person's about, basically maybe find some similarities, which does happen when you read through the transcripts. But good detectives know that once they transition from the interview and rapport building to the interrogation, and now you're starting to accuse me, the rapport kind of gets destroyed and there's no turning back. So it's all out. That's why you may see, or in this case here, when you're reading the transcripts or the other podcast, people were telling you what was happening when they were watching the videos, when they were at the trial, is you're going to have heated exchanges because one, the person being accused is going to try to defend their position, but the detectives that are doing the interrogation, it's all out for them now. There's no turning back. So they're putting everything they got because they're looking to make an effort to close. But Russ, before we break down everything, before we go into, the interview process, the 9 steps, anything you'd like to say about the Reid technique? Oh, you're muted, Russ.
So this is one of those things that's, not really necessarily in my wheelhouse. It's something that I've been around a little bit. I have some experience talking to guys about some low-level things going on where they were certainly guilty or probably guilty. But that's about the extent of that. What I can say about it is that this is one of the things that you see time and time again is the rapport building. And, it's just informational, it's fact gathering, and then it turns into something else. And that's what you could clearly see happened here. All of a sudden, he was put on point because, they wanted to get items from him that would have no value if he was truly innocent. And so all of a sudden he realizes he's in the spotlight. I think it doesn't speak well that so much time elapsed with regard to this. I think they're going to have a hard time, making that sell to the jury. And I think that, if they have any kind of a way to attack the physical evidence with regards to the bullet, that they're not going to be successful in this prosecution. There's a lot hinging on just that bullet. The big problem that he has, though, is he immediately put himself at the scene. And the fact that they took pictures that are allegedly of him because they felt something was off or for whatever reason, that's the worst evidence that he has against him. So again, this is something that it's going to unfold for all of us that are, taking all of this drama in.
Yeah. Now, guys, so the first thing I want to do is we are going to show you later on how these steps kind of play into the Richard Allen, but let's go over it first. So the interview process at the very beginning is going to be an effort to build rapport, to get information. Questions are not really going to be questions that are meant to apply pressure because we want the person to kind of give us information. So the questions are going to be very open. They're going to be open questions so we can go ahead, or the detective can go ahead and get a feel for what this person is about. Basically, it's not about putting the person under pressure right now. This is just about, let me get some information, let me ask some questions, and let me also get a baseline of the individual. This way, if there's any quirks or something like that with, body language or whatnot, I can understand those quirks before we start going in and applying the pressure. Because once you start applying the pressure, then there's some body language that, may start to show up that the detectives are trained to detect. Not to say that the person's lying, but to maybe get to understand that maybe this question applies a little bit of stress, and those are kind of the areas where they're going to want to attack a little bit more. Now, granted, when it comes to the interview and interrogation, the transition starts to happen when the investigators start to believe that there is inconsistencies in the statement or there's deception. And then once they start to believe that maybe that we have enough to go on, we have, the evidence and stuff here, which we haven't put out yet. Then they start to transition from building a rapport and this nice guy attitude to we're going to start making the accusations now, and now we're expecting this person to be totally resistant. But having said that, guys, once you cross from the interview process to the interrogation process, there is no turning back. So that's where all energy is going to come out. And granted, I have it noted here, some of the moments that were utilized during the interview process to gain rapport, the detectives talked about both, they talked about liking weapons. They believe that Richard Allen, had a gun, so maybe he had some interest in weapons. So they also stated that they had interest in weapons, which is very good because it kind of relates to where the interrogation is going. And then, as you can see, it's very relaxed when they talked about it on the podcast. The way they showcased the video, Richard Allen was very relaxed, maybe even going through his phone, and the detectives were kind of leaned back at first. But another thing they noted during the interview process to build rapport was they started also sharing military experience. And then, as I said, they talked about gun ownership. Hey, Russ, so as I just mentioned, that interview process before it becomes interrogation, I mean, there is a risk there, right? You're going to build rapport, and then all of a sudden, when you start finding out that these statements are inconsistent, then you're going to cross over, and then you're going to make that kind of that first accusation, which technically, when I'm looking at what the podcast people are saying, there was moments where they talked about the clothing, talked about the gun, wanting to see his house, and all of a sudden, Richard Allen starts to feel like, okay, now what am I, the lead? Now you're coming after me. And then all of a sudden you start to see him become a bit resistant. But Russ, what's your thoughts on the interview to interrogation side, the transition?
Yeah, that was the thing is that when you see they start asking things from him that couldn't possibly have to do with him unless he was a suspect, all of a sudden, it changed the whole tone of the way things were going. And that's one of the things that you're right. I mean, they have to be all in at that point. The thing that, I keep tripping over in my head, though, is, why weren't all of these things done way back at the outset? He had already put himself there, at the scene, and they just kind of, missed him. They didn't do any follow up. They didn't really, try and nail him down on anything. And so I don't know. I'm a little bit of a loss as to, why all of a sudden they settled on him. It just seems like they must have had some reason that they really thought it was him, but it seemed to me like they stretched the envelope a little bit to get him. And that might be problematic.
Yeah, I think that's something that obviously they're going to they're going through the trial now. I mean, this whole case is really just truly all over the place. Now they're pushing, they may allow for the odinist theory to come into play, which I heard they weren't going to allow. Now, supposedly the judge is going to make a decision on. I mean, it's all over the place. So I want to go into now the interrogation process. Now, guys, there's 9 steps to the interrogation process, at least defined through the Reid technique. But there's a couple of things I want to mention before we break down the 9 steps. One thing is you would like to think in a perfect world, these 9 steps can go in order, but they may not. I mean, you may have to go back and forth depending on how resistant the individual is, because this is, again, you're going all out. So as you start to move forward, the suspect you're going after could fall backwards. And now you have to go back and then go forward. So this is a constant push and pull, and it really does vary on the resistance of the individual. Interrogations could be quick or they could be ridiculously long. And it could be an extreme back and forth. But I will tell you this from the investigators I've spoken to already on this, is that once you set that momentum and you start pushing forward onto that interrogation, you're trying to get that person, you're gonna try to take it all out, no matter how long it goes. You're gonna put all your energy in there because you don't want to lose momentum. And I think that's what happened in the second interview with Jerry Holman. Was Jerry Holman knew at this point, I'm going for it, and the end result is, if we're going to make the arrest, we're going to make the arrest. But where the first one, when they got pissed off, he was able to leave, and then you don't have nothing for 2 weeks. But I think Jerry Holman, decided, hey, we're going to go all out, and I'm not letting them leave after this. We're going to go through this. I also want to mention that sometimes during these techniques, you are allowed to minimize or maximize. Minimize is basically when you're interviewing somebody, maybe somebody may not want to admit that they committed a murder, because that's hard to admit to. I mean, one, how people view murder, it's not socially acceptable. But two, there's consequences connected to that. So most people, suspects, will be like, oh, they're not going to want to admit to that because of what it connects itself to. So, a good investigator, when they're trying to build rapport, they may try to minimize, instead of saying murder, they may say accident or mistake or something that doesn't connect to something that's not socially acceptable or that doesn't carry such crazy consequences. But there's also another thing. As I said, they could downplay the severity. That's the minimization, and that's related to the crime or the consequences. But they could also maximize. They can lie or exaggerate, and they could do this in a couple of areas. Depending on where their tactics are going. If they feel they're able to have power over this individual, they may decide to exaggerate what they've done, what they believe the person has done, exaggerate the evidence, outright lie about the evidence, because at the end of the day they're trying to get this person to admit to something. So they are allowed through this technique to lie or exaggerate. How it works, I have a couple of things here, though, I want to mention here. When it comes to minimizing, we said the investigator downplays the severity of the crime or the consequences to make the confession seem less daunting. The impact here, for an example, it's not like you meant for this to happen. You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's a little bit of minimization because we're not worried about motive yet. All we're worried about is, can we put the person there? That's the key. We'll figure out the why later, but can I put the person there? The impact is this approach reduces the suspect's fear of consequences, making them feel that confessing will lead to maybe even leniency. The maximization is the investigator exaggerates the seriousness of the crime or the potential punishment to create fear and urgency. So now this is on the other side of the spectrum. So example would be, if you don't tell us the truth, the prosecutor is going to go hard on you, going to give you that death penalty. And the impact here is this approach increases anxiety and pressure, making the suspect more likely to confess as a way to avoid worse outcomes. And we'll get to this as we go through the steps. I'll tell you where they may decide to maximize or minimize depending on their read of the suspect. I just want to say how it works, the Reid technique. It works because these tactics play on the suspect's emotional states. So alternating between maximization and reassurance, which is minimization. They're especially effective, and I'm going to show you where they're effective when we go through, but it's going to be step 2 when you develop the theme, step 6 in the passive mood handling, and step 7 in the alternative questioning. But think about the moods. Think about how you're pulling and pushing on the emotion. First, you're coming after them, maximizing maybe however you want to do it, and then you're going to minimize. And it just kind of plays back and forth. But there's one other thing I want to mention, not that it happened because the confessions weren't made at the police station, but I want to talk about the risk of false confession. So this is where the finesse is, because you are playing with people's emotions. It could become very confusing, especially to people that are highly suggestible. And now what happens here is there is a likelihood, and it has happened, and the guy we'll have on the show in the future actually will tell you about a false confession he had. And it's actually the worst thing you can have as a detective, because you want to find out who it is. So if I got someone and I convinced them into a false confession, and that means I haven't done my job, I haven't gotten the person who did it. And the false confessions, minimization can lead suspects to believe that admitting guilt will result in leniency, even if they're innocent. So that's when, again, if you're, tell them, hey, you should confess now, because if you don't, you're going to get the death penalty. And the person's like, oh my God, what do they have on me? Maybe I should. I don't know, even though I didn't do it. And then the maximizations increase the risk by intensifying fear. So that's the adverse of severe consequences, causing innocent suspects to confess in the hope of avoiding harsher punishments. And this is when false confessions occur. I have it in the steps. So when we go through the steps, for step 1, the very first step is you're going to, let's go through the steps first. And then I'll kind of break down where you have to be very careful, because you could be pushing the person towards a false confession. Okay, because that was asked as well. So the first step in the interrogation process, so mind you guys, and Russ, I'd love to get your perspective on this, is that we're going to now transition. I got my information. You've given me enough to lean on. I got some evidence here, circumstantial, whatever it is, but my job now is to try to piece things together. So I think I'm at a point now where I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the accusation, and it is going to be direct. So the first step is direct positive confrontation. And that's when you basically present what you have. You maybe want to exaggerate. I don't know, depending on how comfortable you are with the information that you gained on the interview, because you could have gained some good information that you feel that, you know what, I think I got enough here. I can go ahead and manipulate some of this stuff on my side and see what I can do. But this is the direct positive confrontation. This is when you now present to the suspect that, hey, I'm starting to think it's you. And these are the reasons why. And based on what you've said on the interview. So, Russ, this is the no turning back point. Would you agree, Russ?
Yeah. This is the point where, everything's going to happen or it's not. And, one of the things here is that, they really want to kind of like steer away from anything with regards to the maximization of it at this point, because at this point, that person still doesn't know for sure, especially if they've done it, how much they know. But if you go in there and you tell them something that they actually know and can see and detect is a lie, there's less likelihood of them, falling for, that maximization type of technique out there, because then they know that you're full of shit, and it may dry up any chance that you have of actually eliciting anything from them. So it's a very, very dangerous time for the structure of what's happening, not necessarily between the individuals, but just for the structure of what's happening from the point of view, of course, of the interrogator.
You know what, Russ, you made a very good point, though, because that's another thing I forgot to mention. That's 100% a great point. When you start crossing into that interrogation side, you better have some facts. I mean, I know you got the circumstantial evidence, but you better have some good reasoning to be leaning it towards who that suspect is. You're right, because if you're not good at what it is, and your evidence really isn't that strong, a good suspect's going to outsmart you, and they're going to realize you have nothing, which I'm surprised wasn't realized in this case to some extent. One of the direct confrontations here, Russ mentioned it before, so just as an example, could have been when the investigators told Allen they believed the bullet at the crime scene came from his gun. I also thought I saw it again when they wanted to see his house. The clothing could have been another. Basically, also when they started putting him into the location, because he admitted he was in the location. And the reason why I know they're direct positive confrontation is because automatically, how did the suspect react from it when you brought it to their attention? They're going to see it as an allegation, or you're accusing me. So, Russ, I thought those were good points that would be when they crossed into, especially Jerry Holman, when they crossed into making the accusation, the bullets, the going to the house, you being there, the clothing. I mean, would you agree that's a good example?
Yeah, and that's another thing. I really would have liked to have heard more about that bullet, because the terminology and them, trying to, establish something with regards to, oh, hey, yeah, we're gun enthusiasts or whatever. There is, specific terminology. When someone says a bullet, a lot of times that will mean, a bullet that's been fired, found at a crime scene, maybe passed through the victim or whatever. It's another thing when you say something like cartridge, whereas, in that case, the bullet and the brass and the primer and everything are intact in a way where at this point, as far as my understanding is anyway, is just that bullet was cycled through that particular gun. That's a bit different than, actually having some ballistics on a bullet that went through a person and was definitely fired from that gun. So I think that, there's some wiggle room there for him, depending on, the expert they put on and the expert that he's doubtlessly going to be given to put on his side of it.
And Russ, you also made another good point. Remember how just a couple moments ago, we also mentioned that you want to be careful of, this is why I always have you on the show, Russ, because you don't know what you know sometimes. And this happens to be just your natural skill or your natural talent at understanding this world. So Russ did mention that you got to be very careful of putting the fabricated evidence or the maximization, however you want to word it, but it's more fabricated evidence. And I would say another reason why is that also could lead to a false confession as you go down the line. So if you start off that interrogation, you start whipping up fabricated evidence, it could start to overwhelm the suspect. Because remember, guys, sometimes when they fall into false confessions that we'll get into is because they're tired, they start to resign. So if you start going in saying you have all these things, this person may just start falling into themselves like, holy crap, maybe they do have it. And what the hell's going on here? And it could overwhelm them. So again, a good investigator may know that, maybe it's not a good time to employ that right now because at this point here, I'm trying to get him. I'm trying to get a real emission, a healthy emission. I'm not trying to get a mission that could be seen as being coerced. So maybe it's something later on when you feel you already got something you can lean on that you may want to start to exaggerate a little bit, but you may not want to exaggerate at first, like Russ said, because you're not really leaning on anything strong before you exaggerate. I think that was a good point, Russ. Now, that's easy enough. As I said, that's the direct positive confrontation. Now, the next part is interesting of the Reid technique. So the next part is going to be what they call theme development. Now, this is, to me, is where the good detectives or the good investigators, this is where they excel, because they're going to create the theme that is going to motivate the person to confess. So think about that, guys. This is a secret that the person has never told anybody before. This is something that they've kept in the shadows. In this case here, 5 years, let's say, because murders happened in 2017. If Richard Allen is the person, then this is 2022. So this is something that he's never told anybody. So let alone you want me to tell the person that can hold me accountable for it. So now you got to really be able to manipulate a theme that may allow this person to decide maybe it's okay to say. But mind you, the theme could vary depending on the person. I have seen themes used for people that are narcissistic that you may want to build on their ego or take away from their ego. Like I've seen themes where, the person who done this must have been an expert and all this other stuff. And there's no way you could have done that, Russ. So, maybe it wasn't you. And then you get someone that's so narcissistic that would say, that was me. What are you talking about? No, you're right. No one could have done it like me. Or you get someone who you can create a theme that's built on remorse. I know you're a good guy. Alan. You don't want this family to suffer here. Come on, man. You're a good guy. I know if you would have did it, you would have came up and said, hey, it was an accident, because you don't want the family to suffer. So theme development, it offers justifications or excuses to minimize the guilt. So think what you're doing here, Russ. This is crazy. It depends on who the person is, but you're creating a theme that can motivate them based on what you feel works best for that suspect. So for Richard Allen, maybe the theme is that good guy. Maybe somewhere along the line, the detective said, you know what? Why don't we provide a theme that can minimize some level of accountability that can open up the door to him admitting it? Because right now, I'm not. We'll get the motive later, as I mentioned, but I just need to have this person there. I need to get this person there. So maybe we could start off with something that makes it easier for him to admit that he was there. And then we could start working into trying to create a good theme where we can have him feel safe, where we can maybe minimize his accountability so I can get the admission. That theme development, Russ, you think that's a powerful tool, and that's step 2.
Yeah. So theme development happens to be an appeal to different facets of different personality types. So you can have theme development, like let's say based on vanity, for instance. So if you're playing into someone's vanity because that is the type of person that you perceive them to be, you might tell them, so tell us what you think happened. Give us your theory of the crime. And, sometimes that's, an attempt to get them to say something that, only the killer could know in order that they can, show off. Or maybe it's not even just so much what only the killer could know, but just, the total body of evidence and the total body of the crime in a way that they can, show off for you, show off their vanity. There might be also, in the theme development, an appeal to compassion, right? Maybe you're trying to thread in there that, hey, this is your chance to give your side of the story, and this is your only chance to do that. And you're going back to the minimization side. Hey, things just got out of hand. This was just a robbery, and then the gun went off, and you give them a chance to paint the picture, whatever it is, true or false, as to whether they're really compassionate or not. But they will do that. I'll never forget that I was listening to Robert Alton Harris one time, and he was a convicted killer who was put to death at San Quentin. And he was telling my sergeant, what a good guy he was. And he was just painting this picture. He would pull over and help people alongside the road, and that was his view of himself. Yet he had kidnapped 2 kids at gunpoint to use their car in a bank robbery. And then in order to get rid of them, he just shot and killed them and then took the food that they had and ate it for himself. So sometimes these people, they can be their view of themselves or the way they want themselves portrayed in the media can be different. And so theme development, like I say, is always, a way to assign different views or facets of things within this. And so that's a powerful tool that they can have. And it's a way for them to try and customize the type of confession that they're likely to get.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, I think this plays out because it's, in this case here, Allen was offered moral justification to minimize his guilt. And the example here was they kept on saying he was a good person who made a mistake. Or at least that's what was told to me through the shows I was watching on YouTube. Now, 3 and 4 of this 9-step process, 3, 4, and 5, I'm going to say, so that's the middle, but definitely 3 and 4. This is where you're putting a lot of energy in. And this is, to me, where the emotions are the push and pull, where there's a finesse to it too, because in these areas here, you're playing with this person's emotions. So there's definitely a finesse to this. And I think this is where all energy is going from both sides. The energy to resist, the energy to accuse. And I think it kind of is within 3, 4, and then it is in 5, but it's going to start to die out on one side. Because mind you, guys, this is a dynamic where there's going to be an exchange of power. So I kind of see it this way, actually. At the very beginning of the interview process, let's say the suspect is who has all the knowledge, and you're the interviewer, so you're kind of the power is on this guy. On the suspect who has the knowledge, but eventually what your objective is as the investigator is to shift, and you want the knowledge, and that means you're going to drain it from this guy. You're going to take it from the suspect, so you're going to see the dynamic change. And I think in this stage here, 3, 4, and 5 is where you start to see that exchange, where you're sort of even, but you're fighting, and you're trying to get the knowledge you need to keep pushing forward. Now, mind you, in these interrogations here, it doesn't get complete. They don't get the written confession ultimately, because that's the end game. After the spoken, you want the written. But we'll still go through it as if they did. So this is the handling of denials. So basically, the suspect is going to resist. So they're going to keep on denying. So the denials, as the investigator, you got to cut those denials off. You can't allow the person to settle into any denial. So as the investigator, You're going to interrupt the denials to prevent the suspect from reinforcing their innocence. I saw this played out with Allen because I believe he denied his involvement more than 20 times. But I think it's Holman. Holman is the one that just keeps on cutting him off. He doesn't give him a chance to deny. And there's a lot of cursing going on at this point, but I get it. This is the exchange of power, so the moment you deny it, I'm going to jump on it. Now, granted, this part here, if not handled correctly, could start leading to a false confession as well, because I took note here that when you're going through this denial and you as the investigator are shutting the person down, what happens to the person is it prevents the suspect from asserting their innocence, which can lead them to be frustrated, or this is the part here, confused. What's your thought on this, Russ, when it comes to that exchange and stuff?
Yeah, I think that I think that what I want to say about that is it's a solid technique, in that it kind of interrupts them from getting any finality to the point where they just are able to say, I didn't do it. Because when they say that I didn't do it, that's like a stopping point. That's like the point at which, you either got to arrest the guy or you got to let him go. And so you're always, hoping for, that little bit more, one more thing to tie him in. And so naturally they want to tamp down on those things. The problem, and I can understand how, like, sometimes there's no way they can help this. But when they're doing that, that's something also, though, that the jury is going to see. And that's something you don't necessarily, want the jury to see, because it puts the jury in a position to start to have some level of empathy for what's going on in the heart of this person, especially if they never get to that denial, and yet they're still trying to get there. And I think that sometimes a jury might feel like, wow, that's going over the edge. And then, when we start throwing some colorful language and stuff in there, that can be off-putting to a jury, and it can put them into that position once again where they start to empathize with the person who's going there, especially when they never get to the part in that video, in that investigation, to the part where he confesses, because it just doesn't happen. I think that that's going to be problematic for that jury too. Now, I know that they're going to put on more testimony where he did confess, but they were outside the bounds of the interrogation. It was to other people within his circle. And so, yeah, that's going to be a problem for him. But I'm just wondering how the jury is going to react to the whole handling of denials and the confrontation and the colorful language, and whether or not that's going to make them have more empathy for him than for, the police who are, really apparently, taking the confrontation to a whole new level.
Yeah, and guys, when you're handling the denials, I actually see it where we're passing the ball back and forth, and it's very abrupt. Nope, but nope, and you're not giving the person a chance to provide reasoning. Now, granted, the next step is where you start as the investigator to hold the ball a bit longer, so the power is starting to come your way, and that's where that's when it's overcoming objections. So basically, what you have here is the objections are reframed to align with guilt. Now for the Allen situation, I put down that he kept on trying to say at one point that he was in different areas, and the investigator was trying to put him in this one area. And basically every time he was saying he was somewhere else, the investigator was, nope, you were here. And they kept on pushing him into where they believe he was, because that's where the crime, that's where the murders took place. So again, it's overcoming the objections. It's the objections are reframed to align with the guilt. So basically, this is a little bit different than handling denials. Handling denials is just the back and forth. Nope, that's not true. This part is where you hold on to the ball And when the person starts to provide you with something, you go ahead and give them reason to say, nope, that's not the case. You know, you were there, you know, you were here, and this is what you were doing when you were there. You know, but the funny thing is when it comes to this reframing, remember though, it has to be kind of framed with what they are trying to utilize as their excuse. So in this case here, you know, I wasn't near the girls, but you were by High Bridge, and the girls were at the High Bridge. You know, so you're basically, you know, you're still it's not a complete opposite. It's you're within the context of what they're trying to utilize. So again, you know, I wasn't near the girls, but were you by the bridge? Yeah, but I wasn't near the girls, but you were by the bridge, correct? You see how that kind of makes sense, Russ? It's related to, it's not in the extreme. It's not like, you know, it's like, okay, well, I never saw the girls, and you're not saying something on the extreme. You're saying, no, but you were by the bridge, right? We're in agreement with that, right? You were by the bridge, correct? So we're not talking about the girls just yet, but were you by the bridge? Right? Does that make sense, Russ?
Yeah, this is the point at which you know, they start operating with what I would call, you know, within the realm of multiple choice. And in this case, they don't want to give him any choices that are good, right? And so, you know, it comes back to, you know, hey, well, maybe you weren't near the girls, but you were near the bridge, right? Or any other competent version of that. That's not an absolute denial. And so they just take and they stack him into a position where everything is multiple choice and they're nothing but good choices for them. At least that's what they should be doing. And so, you know, when you say something like overcoming objections, you know, it's really just about, you know, giving them, hey, you know what? There's 3 choices here. All of them are bad for you, but you don't necessarily know it. And so you never give them a choice that's good for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I have another area. It says in the interrogation of Richard Allen, overcoming objections involved, we said dismissing Allen's attempt to explain his whereabouts on the day of the crime, or when Allen tried to clarify he wasn't carrying his gun or wasn't in the relevant area. Investigators downplayed his explanations, asserting that his story was inconsistent with their findings. So this could be a good point where you may want to employ the evidence side of it all, the minimizing, the maximization, whatever. You know, he's saying I didn't have my gun. Well, we have reason to believe you did have a gun there. Because we were able to get the bullet, and we noticed that the bullet could have came from your gun, or we have witnesses that saw you there. You know, so you may want to rethink that. You know, so this is a good chance where you may, if you are going to maximize, this is a good chance to do it, because this is a good chance to kind of go against what he's trying to claim. And then I have this approach aimed to keep Allen from reinforcing his innocence by making his objections seem unreliable or irrelevant, maintaining the narrative that he was involved. So, I mean, I think that makes sense, right, Russ, with the maximum, if that's a good time to employ it?
It is. What I would just say, though, is, you know, when they start down these paths and they start maximizing and they start overcoming objections and they start, you know, narrowing down the number of choices that they give them, the one problem with that is that, you know, it starts to leave questions closed-ended, and they're no longer eliciting every bit of information that they can get from him. And by doing that, I think that, you know, there's actually a risk that they're going to overlook something and they're going to miss something, but they're going to miss something based on the fact that it wasn't presented to them. I think that, you know, there's some circumstances, these guys are the pros, obviously, but there's sometimes where you just want to leave it open. And as long as they keep talking and keep spilling stuff out, it gives you a bigger base to choose from, and you have more questions that you can delve into. But that part, they're starting to restrict it, you know, and tighten it down and put him into a position where, you know, he no longer gets to talk about everything. He only gets to talk about these things in the little circle. And so there is a danger in that.
Right. So I actually, right, I agree with that, Russ. That makes sense. So when we were doing the show, guys, I spoke to a couple of detectives that use this, and I'm actually going to have one on the show probably within a week or two. I just had to do the show today. I couldn't wait because it's trending now. But having said that, I guess it's not allowing them to run off in tangents where they feel more comfortable again. I already got you choked, so I can't open up the door again. I got to keep on applying the pressure, because if I don't at this point, you know, and I hit you up with something that you could pick from anywhere. That's why, as I said, when you go from interview to interrogation, it's no longer what did you do, but rather let me hear your side of the story. And there's a big difference between that, because what did you do? I could pull from anywhere. But when I say, let me hear your side of the story, it's like, well, shit, what have you heard? So now I got to start, you know, constructing my story based on what I believe I think you know. And then, as I said, when you put that evidence out there, it could force the person to start changing their narrative. And I think what's unique about that, Russ, is if you're telling the truth, Russ, no matter what fake evidence you're going to throw my way, I'm going to probably still stay to my story. I would like to think so. Nothing's 100%, because I know where I was. I know I didn't do it. You can make up whatever the hell you want. But when you introduce it in such a way where I tell you one thing and you say, okay, well, listen, I know you've been telling me that, but I'm going to tell you something. I got witnesses right now that see you here. Well, what time did they see me there? You know, or, well, you know, well, wait a second. Maybe I did see 3 girls, but there was no way I went down there. So you can start to see that when you start pushing the evidence through, their narrative starts to shift to try to adjust to what they feel the evidence is. And sometimes the key evidence is, well, we got you on video, you know, so we clearly got you on video doing this. But now, mind you, you better make sure you're on point with that, because if that person really wasn't there, then they know that you ain't got no video. So I think it's more when they don't know. And you know, it's like, well, I got video that says you're here. So now you start to see, well, wait, maybe I was there at 1:30. You know, well, but you told me you weren't there at 1:30. No, wait a second. Maybe I was there. So you're confusing their narrative. But again, like you said, Russ, it could limit information coming your way. So hopefully the investigator has what they need to employ this tactic, so they know exactly where they want the person to focus in on. But man, if you're on the other side and you're not that bright and you're highly suggestible, it could become very confusing for that individual, because in the process of you trying to find out where they're at, you're also putting shit in their head, you know, that they may start to believe. So now this is where you start to see the power going, definitely starting to go really towards the investigator. And I have the retention of the suspect's attention. So here's where the investigators ensure the suspect stays engaged emotionally. So now, again, guys, this is where you're trying to wear this person out. So this is where, you know, granted, if you start to see it going to the other side, that's where you'll see investigators getting, you know, putting all their energy out, because they don't want to give this person a break, because however long it took us to get to this point, it could fall back like this. It could fall back with the wrong question. It could fall back where, you know, you say something stupid that doesn't make sense, and the person's like, oh, wait a second, that's not true. It could just be a split second. And now that person knows, hey, you don't got everything that you're telling me you do. So in this case here, you got to make sure that when you get that emotion going, that person is, this is where you start to see the investigator move closer to the individual. And that's another thing, guys. When you see these investigation rooms, the rooms are usually empty. There's nothing on the wall. There's nothing that can divert their attention to anything. So basically, all that's in this room right now is me and you. So now what happens is when the person starts to back in the corner, I've seen another tactic, actually. Here's another funny thing about that when I'm thinking about it. I remember, I want to say it was Dale Sollers, but he told me something where obviously the way the room is organized matters too, because if you have a table and when you're working together, you may sit kind of like cornered, sort of, you know what I mean? Like basically, you know, I'm at this part or whatever, he's at this part, and you're right next to them, so you can kind of show a partnership. But then when you start to get into the interrogation mode, you may start to try to get in front of them. So now it's like chest to chest, which body language wise could present like some type of conflict or control, similar to playing a game of chess maybe. So you shift from like working on a science project together, that's what he would say, to like now we're playing chess. But another thing he mentioned to me is that the suspect was always put into a chair that had legs, no wheels. The investigator would be able to have a chair that had wheels so they could move. So basically, when they started to gain ground, they would shift, get directly in front of the individual, and be up close to exert dominance. And this would be a time where they would want to do it because they would want to keep the person's attention. So the moment the person started to shift, they would get as close as possible so that person couldn't see anything but the investigator. And I also believe the position of the door matters. The door would be behind the investigator, I believe. So the person didn't have an easy way out. So they felt trapped, if that makes sense. And I think for the Allen situation here, they kept on going back and forth, matching Allen's emotional responses so they can keep him involved. So the moment he got angry, they got right back in his face and they got angry. They didn't want to do anything that can shift the power dynamic in the opposite direction, which would then give Allen power. There's a lot there I just said, Russ. What's your thoughts? Have you ever heard of some of that?
Yeah, I know that there's a number of different ideas that you want to go in there with these guys on, and I think it's fascinating to listen to some of those ideas. But then I also think that sometimes, hey, what if you're putting this guy into a position where he just feels like if he just had your ear a little bit more and it was less oppositional, maybe that would do it for some of them. Maybe for some others, you have to go the hard route. And I just think, it's really about, tailoring to that individual and reading them correctly. I don't know how this is going to turn out in this case, because they never did get the confession in the manner that they wanted it. They ended up, having to, settle for, some things outside, the penumbra of what they were doing in that particular office. And I just wonder if that's not going to end up being the showstopper for them. The fact that they didn't get it, and maybe they didn't tailor things as closely as they should have in this case to make sure that they elicited the right response. But I feel like the main thing that they did wrong is they put too much time between the crime and the time that they finally ended up getting at him. 5 years is too much.
Yeah, someone actually
he is over the emotional part of it.
Someone actually marked that they cleared him, which was unique. But you know what, Russ, about this? So remember we said it's a linear fashion, and sometimes it can go back and forth, or sometimes people don't stay long at one step, or sometimes you could skip a step. There could be a chance that when we start to engage, you don't engage back. You go right into the, your head down, and I know I got you already. I mean, it really depends on the individual and what type of fight is in them. But I will say, regardless, the investigators got to match it or go a little bit above. I definitely believe they go above to get the control. And then once they know they have control, they match it. But they never go beneath. So now the next one, this is where you start to go for the confession. So now, mind you guys, you got to realize this is exhausting. This doesn't happen. It could happen quick, but most of the time, this is a very long process. This could be in the course of hours. So you're talking about a heated back and forth. Now, mind you, with the Holman situation here, there was a challenge. He's like, fuck it, I'm just going to arrest you. We're going back and forth. I'm just going to arrest you. He wasn't even looking for the confession at that point. He's like, I got enough evidence. I guess he was tired out himself. So he just went on the evidence without the confession. Basically, I guess maybe he exhausted everything he got, shot his whole load, whatever it is, and just said, I got enough here to arrest him. Where some people say, well, I got the evidence. Hold on. I'm still in on this. I want to keep going. until I start to feel that I'm losing. So I think Holman could have felt maybe when they were having this engagement that he wasn't backing down, that he was getting extra aggressive and that he was losing ground. So once he knew, it's like, you know what? I'm not going to fall backwards here. My immediate control automatically is going to be, I got the evidence, circumstantial, but I believe I have enough to detain him at least, or whatever. Because I believe he wound up getting charged for 4 counts of murder. Now, there's the felony charges. So now you have the handling of the passive mood. Now, this is where, as I said, the person is now starting to resign. They're starting to give up. So I got the definition here is when the suspect becomes withdrawn, the investigators encourage the confession as a form of emotional relief. You're tired, man. Why are we doing this? We can end this right now. Come on, man. I'm on your side here. I'm trying to work with you. Why don't we just tell me what happened that day? Come on. I mean, you didn't want for this to happen. You didn't want to hurt these 2 young girls, but something must have happened because this isn't you. Why are we going through all this? Why don't you tell me now? And then basically maybe we could work on getting you some leniency. And then basically here, the example I have here is they emphasize that confessing for Allen would relieve the stress that he was going through, because he kept on saying that he was depressed and all this other stuff. What's your thoughts on this, Russ? That's true though, correct? This the handling the passive mood. This is when the person's resigned. Now you definitely have some power over this individual.
Yeah, this is the point where they just need one more little push. Let's get this on the record. Let's get your side of the story out. Let's put this in the best light that we can. Let's let the judge know how you really felt and how this really came about. Let's get this over with, and we'll make sure that you're presented in the best light possible. Give me just one little thing, and then you don't have to say anymore.
Yeah,
and they'll keep moving the mile markers. Just one more thing, and then a follow up and a follow up and a follow up, and then usually I don't. I mean. It could be like a dam bursting, but it's more like, just let it trickle out and trickle out and trickle out till there's nothing left.
Yeah. And now granted, guys, there's 3 more steps, but this is the one main step. This is the last step where you present your alternative questions in regards to what the person's going to admit to. The key is I want the admission. So, I may not get the person to admit to the murder, let's say, but I may be able to admit that there was an accident there, and that the girls were killed, but it wasn't intentional. He didn't mean to. I mean, the key is he gets to choose what he wants to work with. Do you want to go for maybe leniency and settle on this, or would you rather have us get you on this? So you could choose what you're going to kind of begin to set your mind to what you're looking to confess to. And again, just an effort to give the suspect a chance to control the narrative. I have here the suspect is offered 2 scenarios, one of them is easier to admit to. For Allen, the investigators implied Allen could either confess or face worse consequences. And guys, this is pretty much the main thing. This is when you got the total power and control. The last 2 steps, which is obtaining the oral confession and converting the confession into written statement. This didn't happen with Allen. So basically, this would just be, I got the person's verbal, which Allen maintained his innocence the whole way through until he went to prison. And then the other part would be the written, which the investigators failed to secure a written confession due to Allen's persistent denials. But the presenting an alternative question kind of relates back to the theme. Would you agree, Russ? Sort of.
Yeah, this is where maybe this is where they could. Of course, we haven't heard everything that happened there, but if they had presented him with, if they just told him, hey, when you were taking your medication before, did it ever make you feel violent? Did it ever make you feel homicidal? Did it ever make you feel suicidal? And ask some more peripheral questions instead of direct questions. Looking straight at the crime. maybe they could have got him to jump on something like that. It's like throwing someone, a life, a life preserver, except that the life preserver that they're grabbing at has, manacles and handcuffs inside of it. But people will do that because they do want to be portrayed in a more favorable light. So who knows? Maybe that would have been a better alternative, but maybe they did offer him something like that. We just don't know. But I think that would have been effective. I don't know for certain that he was on drugs before. We do know that he's being forced medicated now, and it's probably like Thorazine or something like that. But that is a way that they could have perhaps investigated that in a way to give him what he felt was a life preserver, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And guys, if the interrogations ever come out, maybe me and Russ could watch the video and then kind of stop when we feel they're employing what step, and so you guys can see it live in action. This was just based on what I've watched and what people have told me, especially Hidden True Crime. I just started watching her. But I also was watching I forgot who the other person was today, but they were a day behind, and they also are at trial, and they released a video a day late because it was day 10 of the trial where they started discussing the two interrogations, and he broke it down, even had some drawings of what he saw in the courtroom, but he wasn't as specific as to what was said in the video, like this young lady that does True Hidden Crimes or Hidden True Crimes, because I think she takes shorthand. I think it's T-line, the shorthand. So she's writing all day, don't get me wrong, but she's pretty accurate to what's being said, I believe. Hey, Russ, this was a good video, man. I mean, we crossed into something new. We learned a lot. Anything like to say in closing?
Yeah. I think it's a good discussion. I think that, there's a lot to be learned from this, just putting yourself into different perspectives. When I discuss things like this, I like to, think about the perspective of the interviewer, the interrogator. I like to think about what the perspective is of the perpetrator. We're going to get maybe onto some more information here that might tend to exonerate him, and maybe we can look at that too. I'm real big about just following wherever the evidence goes. And I think that, there's more to come in this. I don't know that there's necessarily going to be any showstoppers or just, the whole jaw drop. Oh, well, now suddenly everything makes sense. I think this is going to be one where people are going to be, maybe a little bit disappointed that there wasn't, some more finality to it. But we're going to see what the jury has to say, because ultimately the jury is the one that has, most of the power, at least, 95% of it in this case.
Yeah. And guys, for me, I thought it was a fun dialogue. I think we actually, maybe not as long, but we probably run through all 9 steps every time we interview an inmate. I'm sure we utilize it, but it's a lot quicker for us. But again, we have more control technically. But I thought it was a good dialogue. I'll see if there's any other parts. If you guys keep sending me stuff that you want me to cover, I'll talk to Russ, talk to Joe, and if it falls within our wheelhouse, I wouldn't have thought of doing this, but it was requested. I felt comfortable with it, and Russ always takes any challenge. So, as always, guys, the show is it's true. Please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.